The cabin lights dimmed as the plane cut through the night sky, a hush settling over rows of sleeping passengers. Somewhere in the middle aisle, a young black woman drifted in and out of dreams, until a sudden crackle from the intercom jolted her awake. A voice, tense and urgent, broke the silence. The captain was asking if any fighter pilot was on board. Hearts skipped. Heads turned. Fear rippled through the cabin like electricity. Why would a commercial flight need a fighter pilot? And why, in the uneasy glances that followed, did she feel every eye slide toward her? Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Stay with this story to uncover what happened next, and why her life would never be the same. But first, please take a moment to subscribe the channel and like the video and comment below from which city you are watching this video. Before the night that would change everything, Amara Johnson lived a life as steady as the morning sun. A 32-year-old aerospace engineer from Atlanta, she thrived on order and precision, the kind of person who double-checked flight schedules and always packed a spare charger. This trip was supposed to be routine, a quick flight to Seattle for a conference where she would present her latest research on sustainable jet engines. She'd left behind her 2 younger brothers, promising to text when she landed. Traveling alone never rattled her, airports felt almost like second homes. Yet even in her confidence, Amara carried the quiet weight that comes with being a black woman in spaces where she was often the only one. She noticed the sidelong glances when she stepped into first class, the subtle pauses at security. Small things easy to brush aside, until tonight. As the plane ascended into a cloud-strewn sky, she settled into the rhythm of flight, unaware that a single announcement would soon shatter the calm. Somewhere beyond the hum of engines, a crisis was brewing, one that would thrust her into the center of a storm she never saw coming. The first half of the flight passed in a soft blur of engine hum and flickering cabin lights. Amara had slipped off her shoes and drifted into the light sleep that comes only at 30,000 feet. Then the intercom cracked alive, sharp, sudden, and far too urgent for a routine message. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice faltered, the brief pause slicing through the darkness. "If there is any fighter pilot or former military pilot on board, please identify yourself immediately." Gasps snapped the quiet. A baby began to cry. The plane seemed to tilt, though the seatbelt sign stayed dark. Amara's pulse hammered as she scanned the rows ahead. Fighter pilot? On a commercial flight? She caught the worried faces of fellow passengers, their eyes darting from one stranger to another as though danger might be sitting right beside them. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, her steps quick and stiff. "Please remain seated," she called, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the message. Whispers ignited: hijacking, engine failure, terrorist threat. The words hissed and multiplied, filling the air like static. Amara sat frozen, trying to steady her breath. Then she noticed it, the looks. One seatmate after another stealing glances her way. A man 2 rows up turned fully in his seat, gaze heavy and unflinching. Another passenger whispered to his companion, eyes fixed on her dark skin and neat braids. Her stomach knotted. She had felt this before, that slow burn of suspicion reserved for someone who simply looked like the headline of their fear. She wasn't wearing a uniform, carried no weapon, yet in the uneasy math of prejudice, her presence suddenly equaled threat. The intercom crackled again, more desperate this time. "We need a response. Any fighter pilot, please press your call button." The whispers sharpened into open stares. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A teenage boy pulled out his phone, angling it discreetly toward Amara's row as if to capture proof of something unsaid. The flight attendant reappeared, scanning the cabin. Her eyes paused on Amara, lingering just long enough to make the message unmistakable. "Ma'am," she said, her tone caught between inquiry and accusation, "are you, with the military?" A dozen heads turned fully now. The cabin seemed to shrink, air thinning under the weight of collective judgment. Amara's throat tightened. She shook her head, but the motion felt small, powerless against the gathering tide of doubt. Outside the window, night stretched infinite and cold. Inside, suspicion pressed closer with every breath. The captain's plea echoed again, urgent and unnerving. Somewhere near the back of the plane, a call button chimed, but whether it was salvation or something worse, Amara couldn't yet tell. The sudden chime echoed like a gunshot in the charged silence. A man in a leather jacket stood near the rear galley, his hand raised. "I'm former Air Force," he announced, voice firm. Relief flickered through the cabin, but it did nothing to ease the eyes still locked on Amara. Before the attendant could reach him, another announcement cut through the moment, sharp and commanding: "Everyone remain seated. We have a passenger of concern." A wave of murmurs rippled forward. Amara's breath caught. "Passenger of concern." The phrase clawed at her ears. Heads whipped around again, the message landing like a verdict without trial. A child pointed. Someone hissed, "It's her." 2 attendants moved down the aisle, their expressions taut, scanning the rows with surgical precision. When they stopped beside her seat, the world narrowed to the sound of her heartbeat. "Ma'am," one said, clipped and cold, "we need you to come with us." Her voice broke on the simplest word, "Why?" No answer. Only the collective gaze of strangers, some wide-eyed with suspicion, others smug with certainty. The man in the leather jacket watched, brows drawn in disbelief, but no one spoke. Not a single passenger rose to question the accusation. As Amara stood, the narrow aisle felt endless, every step through that corridor a public trial. She could hear the whispers sharpen into ugly fragments: terrorist, threat, suspicious. The humiliation burned hotter than fear. She wanted to disappear, yet every movement etched itself into a silent, damning narrative she could not escape. At the front of the cabin, the cockpit door loomed like a sealed vault. An attendant reached for the intercom, murmuring something she couldn't hear. Amara's mind raced. Would she be restrained? Arrested on landing? Her career, her freedom, her very identity felt suddenly fragile. The plane jolted with unexpected turbulence, tossing drinks and nerves alike. In that chaos, one thought blazed bright and bitter: she was guilty of nothing but being seen. And then, just as the fear threatened to crush her, the captain himself emerged, his face pale and urgent, about to reveal a truth no one on board was ready to confront. The captain's words landed like a sudden gust, scattering every accusation that had been hanging in the stale cabin air. "A technical fault in the cockpit," he explained, "an urgent request for anyone with fighter pilot experience to guide a contingency landing if the situation worsened. No threat. No passenger of concern. Only a system alert that had sounded more ominous than intended." But the damage was already done. Amara felt the weight of 100 eyes slide away, embarrassed but unrepentant. No apology came from the crew. No passenger spoke a single word of regret. She returned to her seat with hands that trembled, not from fear of the plane, but from the cold realization of what had truly unfolded. The flight touched down without further incident, yet the memory refused to release her. She replayed the moment when suspicion spread faster than reason, when skin tone became evidence, when silence from bystanders spoke louder than the captain's final explanation. This was more than a misunderstanding, it was a snapshot of something far bigger, the quiet prejudice that travels unseen yet erupts in crisis. Amara knew she would not forget the stares, the whispered accusations, the way isolation felt like a verdict. And she knew her experience was not unique. How many others have carried the same invisible burden through airports, workplaces, neighborhoods, everyday spaces where bias hides behind polite smiles until fear calls it forward? As she stepped onto the jet bridge, one question burned brighter than her anger: when will simple existence stop being cause for suspicion? Think about that as you go about your day. Share this story. Talk about it. Because the next time fear and prejudice collide, silence will only make the cabin darker.